So we're in the 5-star hotel tonight. We have some food.
Yes, sir.
Happy restaurant. In the yak house, we've got a roof over our head as well. Yak restaurant. I'm Ashley. I'm Australian, but my mother's Korean, dad's English. I find it really difficult to introduce myself. I've never been very good at it, to say so. It's a little tough to put everything into a nutshell. My father was always a very adventurous type, and I guess you could say the same about my mother, even more so I think. My dad, when he was young, after World War II, he would run around hitchhiking around Europe against his father's wishes, and then, you know, he was a very unorthodox fellow, and then he happened to meet my mother here in the 80s. For some ungodly reason, she decided to leave the country with some hippie guy, you know, and she's from like rural Korea. Yeah, I guess you could say in my blood there's a bit of, I guess, an adventurous gene, I think, maybe. Your
parents were part of the original authors for Lonely Planet, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Did they ever talk to you about that time? Because I imagine that was really kind of a whirlwind, world-traveling, adventurous youth for your parents.
Yeah, I mean, I caught the tail end of it when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. Well, he met Mum when he did the first edition on Korea. They were covering basically all of Africa, all of India, all of Latin America, some parts of East Asia, and then I came out, and things after that slowed down for my mum, but my dad kept working on the guides. Even with my mum, I think there was a bit of she missed the adventure. We would, you know, go off together to somewhere, so we would be constantly moving to, and Dad would be somewhere else, and then we would kind of liaise back in Australia. Actually, one of the worst memories, and this always comes to my mind, I know this is not, but when I think I was 7, she thought it was a good idea to just ship me off here by myself. And every time I bring this up, she's like, "Oh, I feel horrible, don't tell me about that." But anyway, she shipped me off here when I was 7 by myself, put me on a plane, and thought it'd be a good idea to put me in my auntie's house. No idea about what's going on. I remember sitting at the phone, and every time it rung, I was hoping it was my mum. So I was just totally lost. I think her intentions were good. She wanted to send me here to kind of have a feel of what my other kind of side of my family was like, but I think
she ended giving you a traumatic memory.
In practice, it was a traumatizing period, but it was okay. I came out in one piece. So. Yeah. My mum's from here. Dad was always interested in this part of the world, in particular just Asia in general. So I grew up with a lot of that influence. I think that really kind of drove my curiosity to the continent when I first kind of started venturing out on my own.
Did your parents ever tell you how they met?
Yes, oh, my mum has alluded to this before. So they met on a bus in Daejeon. She came from a village outside, but then she moved there for school. So Dad was here working on the first guide, and he didn't have enough coins to get on the bus. So she lent him some coins, and then they got off on the same bus stop together. Dad was always very good at talking through dictionaries. He was extremely fast at finding words and putting things together. So that's how they were communicating for a long time. I mean, her father was super against it. I mean, everyone told her she was crazy. Like, these are her words. I was young and stupid. My mum told me that when she was first kind of told her parents about my dad, they were like, "Don't you dare bring him into this house." You know, things, you know, of that nature.
And how did their mindset change? Do you know?
Their mindset changed when I came into the picture.
Sure, yeah, that happens a lot.
Before my dad built the house, he was living in an old banana shed, but then it was like converted into this house. I mean, he was a total hippie. He told my mum that he has this wooden house in the rainforest in Australia So when she got there, and this is the story she told me about, she was just like, what the hell? She was like, you told me there was a wooden house in the jungle. And I mean, yeah, he wasn't lying. It was a wooden house. He wasn't lying, outright. She's always told me that it was really, really tough at the beginning. She told me she cried a lot, missed home, things like that. And eventually she said it got easier, as time went by, as her English got better. And I think if you ask her now, if you say, oh, Mum, would you ever move back? She's like, no way. She's like, I love living here too much. I think she's gotten used to the Australian way of life. She's upgraded her home. So. Yeah. So the home has been upgraded from the banana shed. So that was a big bonus. In Australia, we lived in a house in the rainforest. I grew up in basically the rainforest in this house that my dad designed. Yeah. So he mixed different cultural architectural types into our house design. So we had on one side, you had this kind of British stone walls. Then you had, in Korean temples, you have the big kind of wooden poles. So that was like a supporting mechanism in the house as well. And then we had on one side Moroccan mud walls, Korean style sliding doors for everything. And then we had these big kind of Australian verandas that go around the house. And being in the rainforest, I was always running around kind of chasing wild animals, essentially. Not running away from them. No, they would always kind of say, oh, don't try and touch these types of snakes, for example. So I was aware of what was venomous and what wasn't. When I saw a python, I'd just go up and try and grab it, for example. Typical. I mean, these things all played a part in, I guess, how I shaped and how I viewed the world. It was more of I didn't grow up in a very urban environment, so I guess the idea of natural things always grabbed me. What were some significant moments for you during your life? Maybe were very enlightening for you, or moments that were really impactful? I would probably say my dad dying. That was, well, the period of him dying. So he came down with dementia. It'd be like 10 years that he was kind of slowly just, going down. I was pretty angry for a long time about that, just personally, and I had kind of this, I guess, grudge against him because I felt like he just disappeared from my life and I wasn't able to talk to him about a lot of things. It's like this big kind of weight inside you. And in the past 3 years, there was one particular moment where I found myself in the Himalayas, actually. I was kind of just, it was in winter, so it was like minus 35 and just ice everywhere. And that's kind of where I was like, what's the point of holding on to such anger and such, I guess, such weight? And it was just this wash of kind of this wave of forgiveness that came inside me and this wave of gratitude. When he actually did die, which was earlier this year, it was sad, of course, but it was definitely more of a, like, thanks for giving me, like, this I guess, upbringing and this history and this context that I was brought up in. It was a really, I guess, I felt a lot of gratitude for the big realization moment. Yeah. I had read some things about your dad. Of course, the New York Times had written about him. You had written about him. A number of other people. And he's described as a rogue, a true adventurer, a genius, an imperfect man, kind of a whole spectrum between euphemisms to straight up compliments. It sounds like he was a very complicated person. Very complicated. And my mum will tell you the exact same thing. She will probably describe him as very complicated, but also incredibly generous and loving. But also just a complete eccentric at the same time. I grew up with parts of that. I'm assuming it took some sort of impact on me in terms of curiosity, because he was always talking to me about some illicit things that I won't mention here, but he'd be working late at night and you just smell this stream of cigarette and whiskey coming out of the office, and I'd go in there and just hang out and just listen to 60s and 70s rock and watch him work, and he'd give me some whiskey sometimes, and my mum would go crazy because she'd be saying, "Why are you giving him whiskey?" Things like that. So yeah, he was a very wild human, but also at the same time, I think very he touched a lot of people. Yeah. So with his wildness, I guess.
It is an exciting experience, but also a difficult experience, I think, to be around people who live outside of the expected boundaries. What's your mom like?
I can honestly say I don't know how she dealt with, one, my father, and two, me. She is a one-of-a-kind, like, superwoman. I just think she has probably the strongest tolerance for everything in the person that I've ever met in my life. Dealing with all my dad's nonsense and also genius was one part of her life, and then also bringing me up, and I wasn't the easiest child to bring up, to put it lightly. Me and my mum are extremely close because for a long time it was just me and her. Dad was kind of this peripheral figure. He would come and go, but mum would always be that kind of stable foundation. So I think my mum has this incredible energy and this incredible, I guess, drive to live, and this drive to be good, and also this incredibly engulfing love. It's really difficult to describe. She is a one of a kind. I definitely wouldn't be here without her. I was in and out of schools, getting in trouble, suspended, expelled, detentions, never do my homework, running around. She would always be like backing me despite how horrible things could get. It was hard. I can imagine that would have been the hardest time in her life, but she never gave up. She always put in 120% of love, and that made, I guess, in retrospect, when I think about it, as I said, I think that it really affected the way I kind of came out. Because I could have gone a really bad way, but I think with her support and her love, I went in a very, very good direction. We've walked pretty far today, actually. And it's an amazing day. I guess my childhood plays into this again. My parents were always, my mum's from here. Dad was always interested in this part of the world, in particular just Asia in general. So I grew up with a lot of that influence. So I think that really kind of drove my curiosity to the continent when I first kind of started venturing out on my own. So yeah, like my interests have been focused here just because of the, I guess, the sheer diversity of this continent and how much it is changing and how much history it has and influence it has on the rest of the world. So that's really kind of like acts like a magnet to me. I really haven't been able to pull myself away from it. When I first started doing what I'm doing, it was definitely more about, hey, there's a big world out there. I want to learn from it, and I want to take it all in. I want to soak it up. But then as time kind of went past, and I started to kind of have these realizations of basically like, what is this Halfie Crowther project? As in, it's completely stupid. And what I mean by that is this whole kind of identity that you hold onto yourself. And it's more about literally just saying, you are such an insignificant part of the grand scheme of things. And it's a really, it can sound on the surface, it can sound very negative, but I think it's incredibly humbling, and it just wells up this kind of big sense of gratitude. For the past 6 months or so, I've been basically working on my book, which has just come out. That has been a crazy roller coaster, to say the least. But I'm very proud of how everything turned out, and I was super lucky to work with the people I did, and it came out beyond my own expectation. So the book is called Our Dark Materials, Black Carbon and the Himalayas. The impact of black carbon on water security in the Himalayas. So black carbon is sourced from smoke, and the smoke is basically floating up and kind of depositing on the glaciers, and the glaciers source all the rivers, right? So, and then it's melting the glaciers. On top of that, you have climate change. So it's just this big kind of doubling impact. And it focuses mainly on one village who watched their glacier disappear, and now they're facing a really, really strenuous drought. So when I was read about this issue and this village and what the experience that they were going through, it was one of those kind of light bulb moments where I was like, I want to go find out what's going on. When you've been to the Himalayas for a while, you figure out that most people know each other. As big as it is, it's quite a small-knit community in certain regions, so you just go out there with a couple names, and people are very friendly, very open, and that's essentially how I found it. So I just went up there and figured out, hey, let's go figure out this stuff on my own, and that's how it all kind of unfolded after that.
From your parents, both of them have, I can see, a very strong sense of who they are. From both of them, what are some characteristics that maybe you have carried on or are influenced by them? Do you have any?
I think curiosity, stubbornness, and I guess execution on ideas and what I want to do. But also, I think also a bit of stupidity would be mixed into there as well. And by stupidity, I just mean like doing things that you will probably put you at risk, but you're gonna do them anyway, simply because then that curiosity comes in because, oh, if I don't do this, then I'll miss out on that. So a lot of that has been, I guess, passed down. Because yeah, my mom and my dad both equally as stupid, equally as curious, equally as brave, and equally as adventurous. So I think a lot of that has come down to me from them.
Beginning of the interview, you had said, why do people always ask me, what do you do? That is not a great question to ask when you want to know who a person is. Then who is Ashley? And how would you describe him?
I don't know. I would describe him, if I could describe him at all, as... I don't know, this is really tough. Who am I? Who am I is like the old, like, you know, it's the age-old question, right? It's a really tough thing to answer because it's... I don't know. Because it always changes. Who you are as an identity is never fixed. And you can't go through life, for example, thinking that you are the same person as you were yesterday. You're not. I think it's really important to be open to just having that kind of, be open to that change, that who you are as a person isn't defined by who you were yesterday. You make a mistake yesterday, you can be a better human the next day. You know, it doesn't mean that you're going to not make mistakes in the future, but you can still at least learn from that stuff. So I think your identity is always changing, and it's never healthy, in my opinion, to hold on to who you were yesterday, or who you were 2 years ago, or what you did 2 years ago, or what you did last year, or even what you did yesterday. I think that it is more about being open to the fact that, you know, life is just this big ball of moving parts, and you have no control over 99% of it, right? So not being closed to that idea of just being who you are on the day that you happen to be, you know, living.